And our final speaker before we head for the afternoon tea break is Daniel Brown. Daniel is the Principal Scientist at Animal Genetics and Breeding Unit at Armidale and is responsible for the routine delivery of Australian sheep breeding values for the sheep genetics to deliver to ram breeders, as well as ongoing research and development of the genetic evaluation system. Primary focus of Daniel's work has been on the genetic improvement of sheep, and today he's going to give us an insight in what's happening in the ASB AGBU analysis. Thank you. Please make Daniel welcome.
Thanks very much, Bruce. So I'm going to briefly outline today the changes we're making to the analysis coming March, April. Every year we work towards making one set of changes to the analyses and rolling out the R&D improvements that we've been working on for the previous 12 months. So I'm going to touch on what that work's been and what we're actually going to implement, and then talk about the impact on actual breeding values that breeders will see, and also touch on some of the ongoing work that we're currently working on and what might be in the pipeline for future updates. So just quickly to start with a brief summary, I'm going to talk about 6 major things that we're actually implementing in the analyses, but I just wanted to highlight an overview for you first that essentially all the analyses that we do are going to be impacted in some way, and I guess that there's more improvements for the Merino analyses, but there's essentially a series of things which are basically new traits or new indexes we're working on. There's been some edits to the data and also updating some of the underlying genetic assumptions that we make in those analyses, and I'll run through each one of those now. And the first one I had up on that list was some new post-weaning fleece traits. So essentially breeders' recording strategies have changed over time, and like we've seen in other breeds, Merinos are wanting to record their animals earlier in life, and historically we didn't have any post-weaning records in a database, but now we've got in excess of 15,000 records in the Merino database. So essentially we've undertaken some R&D to add new traits for those post-weaning wool records, and we've added in greasy and clean fleece weight, fibre diameter CV and curvature into the OVIS software, so we can produce breeding values for those traits and make better use of those records. I'll touch more about on the data in a minute, but I did want to highlight that essentially at the moment, because there's not a lot of existing research been published, or there's no data being available to do the research on these traits, essentially we had to make a lot of assumptions to implement these changes into our routine analyses. We were able to do some analyses from the data in the database, but essentially we've taken an approach where we've been cautious, and most of the as a result of that, the breeding values will be driven off the data more than they will be driven off other things like relationships and other traits. So by doing this, we've been able to partition out the post-weaning data and analyse it separately, which means that we're doing a better job of handling that data and treating it as a separate trait, which will be correlated to adult and yearling and whole records to a moderate level, but it won't be treated as genetically the same trait, which we know is a better approach. And we see it as just another step in our continual improvement program, and we'll continue to work on these records and do a better job of the analysis as we go forward. And just a couple of points before I leave the post-weaning wool traits is that the way I see it, this is a tool to help breeders make better use of the data and better selection decisions. But there's a couple of key things that we need to acknowledge. The data is going to be handled differently at Sheep Genetics, and we're going to, in some cases, use additional post-weaning records for some animals that weren't being used because they were too young before. But we're also now going to do a better job of using the young yearling records that we were probably being a bit generous and using in the analysis to help breeders. We're now going to treat them as post-weaning records, and that will change some breeding values. But we can think that they'll make things more accurate. And we also know that because the animals are recorded at a younger age, the key early life of things like age, and the dam and dam age, birth type, rear type, all those things are likely to have a bigger impact on those early age fleece traits, and so it's even more important to get those records accurate and into the system. And it's pretty clear from the research we've done that people still need to record their animals later in life. It's very important for anyone using the post-weaning wool records to record them at later ages, and we've shown before the value of recording adult traits. So I think it's important for breeders to use these traits as one part of the process, and to record animals at older ages as well to get a hand on lifetime productivity. And in that sense, we've been working on lifetime productivity in a range of ways, and a number of breeders are recording animals more at older ages, and we've changed OVIS to handle more records from adults. We've added an extra 2 records for adult weight, and also those same fleece traits. So we've got adult greasy, clean and fleece weight, and we've got fibre diameter, CV and curvature. So now we can handle an additional 2 records, and the software's been changed to handle them at an age-based system. So we've got 2-year-old adult records, 3-year-old and 4-year-old records available. At the moment, that's where the most of the data that's being recorded by industry sits. If there's a need, we can increase them to include additional records if the need arises. So I think we've said this for a couple of years now, that we see a lot of value in breeders recording at least 1 additional adult record, and you know, especially for adult fleece weight and for body weight, we don't think enough breeders are recording those traits, and we like to encourage breeders to think about capturing them throughout the adult life of use. And I also like to highlight that there is a lot of existing research that's helped us make these decisions, and we've done a lot of work with the sheep genetics data, and also the resource populations, in particular the AMSIA database and the INF database, to base the decisions about how to incorporate these additional adult records. That those data sets and research has been able to help us inform those decisions. Another key thing that we've been working on is revising some of the genetic parameters and the correlations between traits that we use in our analyses. We've done a range of work in using the Merino Select database, as well as using the CRC INF database, to try and understand the relationship between particularly carcass traits and all the other production traits. And I won't go into the details today. We're still working on that, and we haven't formally resolved at the technical committee level when to implement those. We'd like to implement them soon, but we do know that for some of these traits, we've got more up-to-date estimates of those genetic correlations, and a quick summary is that I guess that the correlations between the carcass traits and body weight, worm egg count and reproduction, and probably even wrinkle, are favourable and more strongly related than what we might have been using in the analysis, and fibre diameter and fleece weight is antagonistically related. So it's important for us to take those relationships into account, and we've been through a process of review, and that will influence breeding values for some of those traits, and also things like index developments and predictions of what sort of response we might get from using indexes. So we're working on that update to the parameters. If it's not applied in March and April, it'll definitely be applied in the next changes in 12 months' time. Another thing that we've realised in the last 12 months is that some of the reproduction data that we've been using from the INF resource population, from the AI joinings or the base U's, is not actually recorded in the same way as what all the industry data is recorded. In a sense, for all the AI joinings, the backup joinings or matings weren't recorded. So essentially that creates a bit of difference in the trait definition for that data, and the other issue is that most of the base used in the INF flock were uninformative anyway. So we've been able to show that it's probably best to remove that data, and we've gone about doing that. So from the reproduction analysis, we've taken out essentially all the joining records, and as a result of that, all the body weights for those ewes come out of the analysis as well. So that has had an impact in the reproduction analyses, but generally not for animals of interest to industry. So essentially, a summary of those changes that we're implementing are general improvements to the analysis and the way we handle data and adding new traits. And the key impact in terms of breeding value change will be seen on adult weights and reproduction across all analyses, and also for the wool traits in Merino Select. And the flocks that will be most affected by those changes will be flocks that have got adult records for weight or fleece traits, and also post-weaning weights or even young yearling records. And I'll show some examples of those now. So I'm just going to show a quick summary of an example of how breeding values might change. I'll just take a bit of time to explain these graphs, so I'm going to show three of them. Essentially what we have here is the relationship of breeding values from a routine analysis to a test analysis, which is going to be implemented in March and April. So here we have all animals in analysis. Then I've increased accuracy to be greater than 25% for this trait, greater than 50%, and greater than 75%. So essentially it shows in these cases that breeding values are lining up quite well and highly correlated between our two analyses. But especially for the more lowly accurate animals, we do see animals changing. In some cases, this is adult weight. I'm showing you here from a maternal run. We see that some animals are changing by several kilos in their breeding value. That's due to a number of reasons. In this case, the first reason is that we've changed the way that we're handling adult weights. As I said before, we're essentially allowing a 2-year-old, 3-year-old and 4-year-old record now. Previously, we just used the first record that was available for any age ewe. So in a lot of cases, there were adult ewes recorded at 5 years plus. We're not using those anymore. So there have been a small number of records are not being used, but in general, we're using more records. For now, we allow 3 records for any animal, which is obviously at 2, 3 and 4-year-old are generally used being recorded. There's also a correlated impact on the younger age traits. So an animal that, for example, has got 3 adult weight records now being used, we'll see a change in their yearling and hogget and post-weaning breeding values as well. So if we look at an example of the change in reproduction breeding values, this is number lambs weaned from the maternal analysis as well. You can see that very little change in the highly accurate size, but there are some changes in the more lowly accurate animals. Again, adult weight is driving some of this change because we've, as I've said, removed records and used more records and changed the way we handle adult records. We're seeing a correlated impact on number lambs weaned because we use those body weights in the reproduction analysis as correlated traits. And the other thing is that we've removed the AI joinings from the INF database. That has 2 effects. It's not only taken out the direct reproduction records for those ewes, which will affect their relatives. It's also meant that we're not using the body weights for those ewes, which has a further impact on some animals that are genetically linked to industry animals. So they're the main 2 reasons why we're seeing changes for number lambs weaned. Now, in general, I said there was more enhancements to the Merino Select analysis, and we'll see more changes in fleece traits than what we'll see for adult weight and number lambs weaned. Again, the same sort of graphs, we see some significant changes for some animals, for the more lowly accurate animals. Generally, the correlations for the high accuracy animals are very good, and across the whole spectrum of flocks, the correlations are high. The main reasons that we're seeing these changes is because, firstly, the post-weaning wool traits have been added, so we're using some additional records for I think we've got about 15,000 post-weaning records that I mentioned before. We're now using all those in analysis where we weren't previously using those. And in some cases, animals are actually had their data moved from yearling, so too young for yearling, but we've been using them back to post-weaning. So we're changing the way we're handling their data. We've also added those additional 3 records for adult fleece traits, and that has a correlated impact with all the other age fleece weights and fibre diameters and other traits. And in some cases, we have lost those older age adult records because we're not using 5-year-olds and greater anymore. So there's a combination of impacts that all have a flow-on effect through that analysis. So finally, I'd just like to touch briefly on some of the existing work that we're working on and what other things are on our radar to work on in the next 12 months. So one of the core activities that Richard's already mentioned is that we're looking at trying to develop more accurate breeding values for the carcass traits and particularly eating quality traits. A key part of that is the single-step analysis, where we use all the phenotypes and all the genotyped animals together in one analysis to estimate a multi-trait breeding value from all those different sources of information. So one of the key reasons we want to do that is because there's some key relationships, in particular the antagonisms between eating quality and yield that Hamish mentioned before, that we want to make sure that we account for in our breeding values. The second reason is a single-step analysis essentially allows us to propagate the benefits of those phenotypes and genotypes through all animals of interest. And the third thing is that we want to use the on-farm body weight and scan records in that analysis, which we know those traits are correlated, and that'll help us produce eating quality breeding values and carcass trait breeding values for the most informative set of animals that we can. Along those lines, Andrew's done a lot of work looking at developing a new index to put an economic value on eating quality, and he'll talk much more about that tomorrow, so I won't steal his thunder there. But we've been working on both these together, and we expect to roll this analysis out mid-2015. Andrew's already done some test runs along these lines, and I think it'll be a good step forward for eating quality and also the carcass traits. So for a number of years now, we've been working on doing a better job for reproduction traits. We've shown for a number of reasons that we want to move towards a component trait analysis where we're actually producing breeding values for fertility, litter size, and also lamb survival. And we'd like to do a better job of breeding for lamb survival, full stop. So we've been working on the analytical side of that, and I was also working with breeders to try and capture better reproduction data to allow us to do that analysis. We're also looking at how we can use other traits, correlated traits, to improve our selection, particularly for lamb survival. We've done some work recently looking at things like maternal behaviour and other temperament traits, and just trying to evaluate which are the best ones there to help us breed for mothering ability and also lamb survival. So that's ongoing work, and we hope to release a enhanced reproduction analysis in a not too distant future. And an important part of that has been using pregnancy scan data, and I'll talk a little bit more about that now. Over the last 12 months, essentially, the technical committee resolved to use PregScan data. We've been able to show that PregScan essentially genetically correlated with number of lambs born very well, and we can use that data in our current our current reproduction analysis. So, as part of using pregnancy scan records, we need a bit more information that we're currently getting. We need to know about the scanning dates, scanning groups, and scanning ages and things like that, so we can actually use that PregScan data effectively. And we need that data through some sort of mating module, and that's something we've been working on now for a number of years. And we've actually modified OVIS, our analytical system, to handle those PregScan records, but at the moment we're really lacking data from breeders to fully test that. We've got some records in there from breeders, but we don't have enough to fully test that. So essentially, I'm requesting you, if you've got PregScan data sitting out there, we'd like to get that through the system. As Hamish said, most of the software providers now have got the capability to get that through to us, so we'd really like to see that so we can implement this as soon as possible. There's not a lot of technical reasons stopping us actually using that, and we'd hope to do that by mid-year if we can. But we'd be keen to talk to you more if you've got PregScan records sitting there ready to use. I just want to touch a little bit on lifetime productivity again. It is still a key area, even though we've changed OVIS to include these post-weaning and adult traits. We still think there's more work to do. We want to continue to improve the way we're handling the post-weaning and adult traits to get the most use out of the data and make sure we're doing the best job of producing reliable breeding values as we go forward. There's a range of things we need to keep an eye on, like the genetic parameters, and also the things like the adjustment factors for age, birth type and rear type that we need to estimate from the data and make sure that we're actually using the best figures we can to produce the breeding values. And again, another request, if we've got post-weaning data out there, we'd really like to see it come into the system as post-weaning data. We want to make sure that dates aren't changed. To get it into the system, into yearling, we don't need to do that anymore. We'd like to get as much data in there as quick as we can so we can make sure that we're producing the most accurate breeding values we can for these traits. I just want to finish up by touching on other potential areas of work. I'm not going to go through these in any detail, but there is a range of things that we've got on our radar to look at, potential R&D projects. Some of these are tools for breeders to use, some of these are enhancements to the way we produce breeding values. But essentially what I'm asking from you today is feedback from you. A lot of the things we do are focused on ideas or issues that come from breeders. If anyone's got problems or suggestions or issues that they'd like to raise, we'd love to hear about them, and if we can do anything to help, we'd like to put that on our potential work plan. So feel free to give us any feedback that you'd like. So essentially, my key messages are that essentially we're going to roll out in the next few months a couple of key enhancements to all the runs to improve the accuracy of the ASPVs and the way we handle the data. Essentially, I'd really like to see as much post-weaning wool data and adult wool data as breeders have got, so we can try and get that into the system and make sure that we're doing the best job we can. But also encourage people to think about including as many adult weights and condition scores into the mating modules in on-farm software. We want to make sure that we're getting good information for adult weight and mature size, and also we want to work towards using condition score in our evaluation in the future as well. And again, pregnancy scan data is something that we're working on. I would like to see that come through the system so we can make use of that as soon as we can. Essentially, now all our R&D is aimed at producing, breeding values, accurate breeding values for a wider range of traits. And thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, we'll leave that last slide up there. Yeah, floor open for questions of Daniel. Oh, yep, couple. Let's go other way. Yep. So take the first one, Daniel. Yep. Adult weight is influenced so greatly by environment. How would you suggest applying management groups when submitting adult weight data to remove the effects of condition score?
That's a good question. We've done a lot of work on adult weight and condition score in both the Merino Select data and also the INF flock. Sam Walker, who'll talk tomorrow, has done a lot of that work. Essentially what we've resolved from the sheep genetics point of view is that we want to capture adult weight at joining. Essentially, adult weight and condition score are both highly correlated across time and across adult ages, and that'll allow us to do two things. It'll allow us to minimise the effect of reproduction on adult weight and condition score, and also to get the best grouping of animals. So pre-joining weights will reduce the issues with previous lactation and current gestation, as also minimise the group effects. So that's what we're proposing, and most of the mating modules should have the capacity to give joining weights and condition scores.
Daniel, does that address this second part to that, what you just said there?
Well, at the moment we're not using condition score in the analysis. It's something that we've done some research on, and we see some value about using from producing a breeding value for condition score in the future, and also maybe it might be an important correlated trait for, say, reproduction traits. But we haven't actually implemented anything yet. We want to do more in R&D and work out how it should be incorporated into sheep genetics.
Yep. And you mentioned a little bit more on that tomorrow.
A little bit, yes.
Yes, yep, okay, yep.
You mentioned about taking the weight at joining. What about also taking a weight when you take the rams out of joining? Because the basis of a lot of the analysis that we do is having all the sheep run in the same management group. And over mating, it's possible that some mobs may gain more weight or lose more weight than others. And so that would actually also have some impact on the conception rates or the litter size.
Yeah, so I guess there's two main issues there. That the work that Sam and I have done shows that the adult weight and condition score are highly correlated genetically at different time points. So from a genetic evaluation of weight and condition score, there's not a lot of value in taking those additional measurements. But I'm not saying there couldn't be value for other reasons and impacts on other traits. But Sam has also looked at weight change and condition score change at various time points in the SHIP CRC data, and there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that it's of any benefit to us at this point in time. But that being said, I would say that we didn't have the perfect recording of use across key time points in that data. We sort of had to infer a lot of stuff. So I think there's potential to do more work there, but evidence to date suggests that there's not a lot of value in doing those additional recordings.
Yep, a question over here. Ian, can we go back to Daniel's second to last slide? He had a bit of a wish list there. Name, please.
Brian Ashton, Eyre Peninsula. As someone who works with wool producers, commercial guys a lot, I find that one of the biggest problems with getting them to use ASBs is that there's too many ASBVs. So getting another one, to me, is just another headache.
Well, essentially, we don't need to change. Don't need to produce more breeding values from what we're doing. All we're doing is making better use of more data. So essentially, the indexes will still use the same breeding values. The indexes won't change. Essentially, what we're doing is making better use of the current data we have and allowing people to record more and making more accurate breeding values. You know, the key ASBVs are the same, and you know, for commercial breeders, they will not see any additional breeding values.
Thank you, Daniel. Any other questions? Yep, a name, please.
John Corbin. What's the benefit to a terminal breeder of the adult weights?
Mature size. So at the moment, the correlations between post-weaning growth, for example, which is a key part of all terminal size selection program, is strongly correlated with mature size. So if you don't record adult weight, there's only one way for mature size to go, and that's to keep going up. Adult weight's an issue for a lot of sheep breeders these days, and we need to record adult weight so we can actually select sheep to grow well early and don't necessarily get that big. And Troy Fisher's done a PhD and can comment more about that, I think. But it's pretty clear to us that we need to record it to be able to do anything about it.
Once or twice or what? What's the plan?
Oh well, the research we've done to date suggests that one adult weight measurement would be enough to do something about it. The more, the better. Given EID and the ease of putting sheep over the scales, I think we should be seeing lots more adult weights, and we can pick animals that don't have a huge mature size but grow well early.
Any other questions? Yep, one more down here. Yep.
Yeah, Andrew Buffler. Daniel, with those, it's great to see a lot of this Merino adult ewe data and things like that. Just your integrity of it though, like we've always been encouraged to keep your culls in whatever and get as many things scanned to that contemporary group. By the time you get to a ewe at 4 years of age or something, obviously, if you're a stud breeder, all the brothers have been sold off and rams have all gone, so that part of that drop's gone. You might have done a phenotypic classing and 30% have gone out, and then you've had some dries and culls over the journey, so you might have 30 or 40% of that whole contemporary thing. Is that going to compromise, or a bit of information is better than none at all, or how does all that work?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. I guess the main thing is that we need some good early age measurements, or we need at least one measurement with the majority of the group there to give us that ability to account for that selection. And it depends what the selection is on. If the selection's on the breeding value traits, then it's more important. But if it's on unrelated traits, it doesn't affect our breeding value so much. So it's a bit of a balancing act there. But in most of the data that we've got in the Merino world, the there's still lots of animals available at 2 and 3 years of age and 4 years of age. So we have got pretty big groups, and while there might be some compromises because of selection in those data, the data is still much more beneficial than not recording it. I encourage people to record more, and that'll still inform the breeding values of the current animals, and we can use the other information that we've got in the system already to account for that selection as best we can.
I think a number of us knew what the answer was going to be from Daniel there. Yeah, record more. He likes numbers, that's for sure. Yep. And obviously there's strengths in the Land Plan and Merino Select numbers. Yep. All right. Okay. Please join with me in thanking Daniel for his. So just before we head to the afternoon tea break, there was mentioned through 2 or 3 of those talks that there is services and support out there, and one of the groups of that is called the Genetics Service Providers Network, and they're the group of consultants who offer one-on-one farm consultancy in your breeding programs, also deliver the sheep CRC, sheep genetics, ram select workshops as well. They don't know this, but I'm just going to ask all of those genetic service providers just to stand up in the room so that people can get a bit of a look at you, and so they can line you up during the next couple of days. Yep. Okay, so you can see we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and maybe 1 or 2 just haven't stood up as well. So we've nearly got 9 or 10. And Tom here as well. Yep. Okay, so we've got 9 or 10 genetic service providers. They basically deliver ram select workshops on your properties as seed stock producers for your commercial clients. So, and I know looking out through the crowd, there's a number of seed stock producers who actually have hosted the ram select workshops. If you haven't hosted one of those, side up against somebody who has and determine the benefits that they've actually got from hosting those workshops in terms of educating your clients and expediting that delivery of R&D through the industry. So now we're going to move to afternoon tea. It's just out in the foyer here. We'll shorten it up to 25 minutes, and if I can have you seated back here at 3 o'clock sharp, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.